Hey, what's going on, everybody? Brent Hyden here, coming at you on this Saturday morning, talking tonight's 8-game slate around the association. Quick reminder before we dig into the slate, please make sure you hit that like and subscribe button down below. If you happen to stumble across this video, you're not already following me on Twitter. My Twitter handle, at BrentHyden1, is in the description down below, along with my Patreon link, patreon.com/BrentHyden. If you head over there and you're not already signed up to my projections or content, you can take advantage of my end of month offers that I have available going on over there, or you can sign up for one of the basic or premium packages for your monthly Patreon pledge. Or if you send me a direct message over on the Twitter machine, you can get access for a very affordable one-time price, carrying you all the way through the playoffs. I do have a New Year's special going on. Without further ado, let's hop into the games. The first game of the night that we're going to talk about, Houston at New Orleans. Pretty good game to target here. Pretty good game to start with. Houston 1.5-point favorites in this game. 229 over under. James Ennis, Nikola Mirotic, or James Ennis and Chris Paul remain out. Elford remains out. Mirotic, I don't believe, has been ruled out yet, but not expected to play. Actually, let me verify that real quick. I forgot to look first thing this morning. He's questionable for this game. I don't expect him to play, though. James Harden has been absolutely on fire. 8 straight 30-point outings with 4 efforts of more than 40 points, averaging 40.5 points during these 8 games. Just been a freaking machine. Obviously, a lot of that without Chris Paul. But Clint Capella also been on a roll here, averaging 20.3 points and 21.3 rebounds over the past 3 games. Has posted 8 straight double-digit outings on the boards. Davis has grabbed at least 17 rebounds in each of the past 4 games. He's been on fire as well. And Drew Holiday has been really solid recently too, scoring 18 or more points in each of the past 7 games. Obviously, we do know that Chris Paul is out. That means James Harden, his monster usage rate of 47.9% and 1.87 fantasy points per minute average is going to be a very, very strong option here. Obviously, if you want to pay up for James Harden, you most certainly can. There is absolutely nothing wrong with playing him tonight. He has, again, been unstoppable with 40-plus points in back-to-back games. This is a really, really good spot here for him. Pelicans not great defending in the backcourt, so I have absolutely no issue with James Harden. It's going to be tough to decide whether you want James Harden or Anthony Davis. I'm probably going to lean James Harden here, but obviously we'll get into Anthony Davis in just a moment. Outside of Harden, Eric Gordon, definitely a solid mid-range option. He's 6 straight double-digit scoring efforts, scored 20 points against Boston. He hasn't shown up a ton of upside recently. Coming in at 5,800 over on DraftKings. He is 6,300 on FanDuel. It is a revenge game for Eric Gordon, so that's worth monitoring. But, 25% usage rate when you take Ennis and Chris Paul off the floor. Price is kind of stabilized right at that 5,800, at least on DraftKings. It's a solid matchup. He has topped 30 fantasy points in 4 straight games. Continues to play a lot of minutes, can get you some of those assists, things like that. Nothing really jumps off the page for this being a great matchup for him. But I mean, he's still a really, really solid, option in this spot. I do have a decent amount of interest in him. Austin Rivers has not started yet for the Rockets, but has topped 30 minutes in both games. Remains a really, really good cheap option here. Austin Rivers, 3,800 on DraftKings, 3,600 on FanDuel. A very, very strong FanDuel punt option, but even over on DraftKings, where he's, again, 3,800, still playing a ton of minutes, taking a decent amount of shots, fast-paced game. Might end up in the starting lineup soon, maybe not, but he's still a really, really strong value. And then PJ Tucker, again, remains one of the better options on a nightly basis as far as like cash game and tournament values. 4,300 on DraftKings, 4,800 on FanDuel. I liked him a lot in this spot. Opponents are shooting 40.6% on corner threes, 50% of PJ Tucker's field goal attempts are corner threes. PJ Tucker has been really good recently. We know he's going to play a lot of minutes. He basically stands in the corner, spots up, takes a decent amount of shots each night, but gets you, the rebounds, some of the steals, things like that. Coming off a down game against Boston, but had been over 20 fantasy points in a large stretch of games prior to that. And then also does have upside against this New Orleans team last time out, 6 of 11 from the floor, 19 points, 29 fantasy points. I have a lot of interest in him. Clint Capella, I mentioned, been downright unstoppable over the last 6 games, has averaged 15.3 points, 17.3 rebounds over that span. Last 3 games, 23, 23, and 18 rebounds. Pelicans do a decent job on the boards, but they are giving up 51.3 points in the paint. I have a lot of interest in Clint Capella, 8K on DraftKings, 9,100 on FanDuel, as a guy with really decent floor and a lot of upside in this spot tonight. Very, very strong option. Going to play a bunch of minutes to match up with Anthony Davis. Just have to hope he stays out of foul trouble, which is not generally something we worry too much about with Clint Capella. You can use Daniel House as a FanDuel value. You can use Gerald Green as FanDuel values as well. Flipping over to the Pelican side of things, Anthony Davis. It's Anthony Davis. He's been insane recently, coming off an 80 fantasy point game against the Mavericks, rebounding just through the roof. Just so heavily involved in the offense. Houston is allowing opponents to shoot 67.4% at the rim. Davis has taken 45% of his field goal attempts there. He is, of course, one of the top options here. He's a viable Harden pivot. He's a couple $100 cheaper over on DraftKings. And over on FanDuel, he is $100 more expensive. You can probably, I haven't tried on FanDuel, you can probably get Harden, Beal, which we'll get to later, and Anthony Davis in a lineup. It may not be too terribly hard. We'll have to take a look and see at that, but very, very high upside play in this spot. You might even be able to do it over on DraftKings as well. We'll have to take a look and see. Maybe I'll do that at the end. Julius Randle, obviously another excellent option here, especially if Nikola Mirotic is out, and I do expect him to miss this game. He's currently in the projections for about 24 minutes, but again, I expect him to miss. Julius Randle will continue to start, and this is obviously a good spot here against a Rockets team that lacks rim protection and is giving up a decent amount of points in the paint. Opposing power forwards have shot 48.5% from the floor and 40.4% from three against the Rockets. While Randall isn't much of a three-point shooter, does produce 12.7 points in the paint per game. He owns a 26% usage rate whenever you take Mirotic off the floor and you have Randall, Davis, and Holiday on the floor together. So again, I do have a decent amount of interest in him here tonight. Outside of them, Jrue Holiday, obviously someone to strongly consider in this spot. Absolutely love him. Continues to be a guy that you feel pretty confident is going to get you, 30 plus or 40 plus fantasy points on a nightly basis. Again, I do expect Mirotic to be out, which is a little bit of a boost for Holiday. It's a great matchup, great spot here for him. I have a lot of interest in Holiday. It's the same story every single night. Darius Miller, each one more guys that you can consider as GPP values or on FanDuel where their price is still cheap. Moving on to Charlotte at Washington. Charlotte 1-point favorites in this one, 226.5 over under. John Wall doubtful for this game. He's slated to see a specialist. There is no timetable on for his return. Otto Porter out, Dwight Howard out, and Markieff Morris is questionable for this game. Kemba Walker averaging 27.4 points on 50% shooting over his last 5 games. Kemba Walker headlines this game. One of my favorite options on the board at 9K tonight. Team high 29.7% usage rate. Great matchup. Washington ranks 27th in defensive efficiency to point guards. They're allowing point guards to shoot 38.6 from 3, which is a boost to Walker, who takes 43% of his shots from 3. Kemba Walker coming in at 9K on DraftKings, 9,900 on FanDuel. A very, very, very strong play. A guy that I have interest in building around tonight if I can afford him. Outside of Walker, pretty much all of Charlotte's in play here. I do like Malik Monk a little bit as a value with Tony Parker being out. I still don't have him projected for a ton of minutes, but 43% of his field goal attempts are above the break threes. Washington allowing 38.1% on above the break threes this season, so I do have interest in Malik Monk. Marvin Williams has been really good of late, averaging 31.9 points, fantasy points on 15 points, 7.3 rebounds, 44% three-point shooting, and 45% field goal over the last 4 games. Washington getting crushed by opposing power forwards, 26th in defensive efficiency to the position, allowing them to shoot 40% from 3, 48.2% from the floor. Marvin Williams, 5,100 on DraftKings, 5,700 on FanDuel. A very, very strong mid-range option, and might get some small ball center minutes as well. And I could almost guarantee you no one's going to have Marvin Williams in their lineup tonight. Cody Zeller has been seeing some decreased playing time. We did see him last night, actually, get a decent amount of run, put up a monster game against Brooklyn, of course. But at 4,300, I do like him in tournaments. This is a really strong spot here, but would just be a tournament option here. So both him and Willie Hernan-Gomez tournament options in the spot. And then Jeremy Lamb is pricey, but a very good cash option here. With John Wall slated to see a specialist, we already know he's probably not going to play. That's a huge boost to Bradley Beal coming in at 34.3% usage rate, 1.45 fantasy points per minute. Those numbers actually go up if you take Markieff Morris off the floor, so we need to monitor the news on Morris. But Bradley Beal going to be super mega chalk, and for good reason, coming in off a game against Chicago where he put up 54 fantasy points without John Wall. Hornets ranked 26th in defensive efficiency to shooting guards, allowing to score 22.8 points, 6.1 rebounds, 5.5 assists, 46.6% field goal percentage, and 38% from three. Bradley Beal, again, 7,900 on DraftKings, 8,400 on FanDuel, just simply too cheap to not have a massive amount of exposure to. Even if you're building 150 lineups, I would still have a crap load of Bradley Beal in the spot. Outside of Beal, Tomas Satoransky, once again, mega chalk point guard option. Only 16% usage rate, 0.77 fantasy points per minute without Wall. Numbers match up, not the greatest, but he's going to play 35, 37, 38 minutes, and he's like 3,300 on DraftKings and 3,800 on FanDuel. Good luck fading someone that cheap that's playing that many minutes. Trevor Ariza, not a very high ceiling at his current price tag, 5,400 on DraftKings, 6,100 on FanDuel, but a pretty strong cash game option. You could use him in tournaments. Charlotte does rank 20th in defensive efficiency as small forwards. He's going to play a ton of minutes, obviously get a few extra shots and things like that with Otto Porter and John Wall being out. So I don't hate using Trevor Ariza here. What was his game last night? Yeah, he didn't have a very good game against Chicago, but played 40 minutes, took a ton of shots. That's appealing in this spot. But you can look at Jeff Green. Thomas Bryant is a guy that I was all over last night. Hopefully you played him because he had a fantastic game. Thomas Bryant, 3,900 on DraftKings and 4,400 on FanDuel. Would get a significant boost in minutes if Markieff Morris is ruled out. Right now, if Morris plays, I only have Thomas Bryant at 22 minutes. I would be bumping that up almost to 30 minutes if Markieff Morris misses. So just monitor that news. He also happens to be sold on averages like 1.2 fantasy points per minute when you take Wall off the floor. So very strong option here against a Charlotte team that's not terrible and also not great against opposing big men. They are giving up 46 rebounds per game. And with a lot of guys that take shots at the rim, you have Miles Bridges, Kemba Walker, Jeremy Lamb, MKG, guys, a lot of guys that take shots at the rim. You can get some blocks out of Thomas Bryant here tonight. So again, if Markieff Morris is out, go back to the Thomas Bryant. Well, moving on, Cleveland at Atlanta. We're waiting on some injury news for this game that's going to impact a lot. But there's still a lot to like with, especially on the Cleveland side. Atlanta, 3.5 point favorites in this one, 218.5 over under. We know Plumlee's going to be out. Taurean Prince is going to be out. I believe Alex Lynn going to miss this game as well. Let me double check. He is questionable for this game. And we don't know Hood, Zizic, and Nwaba's status yet, or Tristan Thompson. Thompson, I don't expect him to play. He's only gotten like one practice under his belt, but we still need to monitor that news. Colin Sexton, just 2 of 16 from three-point range over the last 8 games. Not very good. Kent Bazemore, on the other hand, has been really good. It has 55 points on 23 of 44 shooting over the last 2 games. Cavaliers have been held under 100 points in 5 of their last 6 contests. The Hawks have scored at least 100 points in 11 of their last 12. Assuming Nwaba and Hood are out, which, again, we need to monitor that news. I would kind of be shocked if they play, but, again, still need to monitor that news. Alec Burks and Jordan Clarkson are my top options here. I can't do Colin Sexton. I know he's cheap. I know it's a great matchup. I just need the guys that I'm getting exposure to be able to do something other than score. Like, he's not a playmaker. He sucks at setting up other teammates. He just doesn't do anything other than take a bunch of shots, miss a lot of shots, and that's pretty much all he does. So if you want to sprinkle him in tournaments, fine. But I would rather go with like Alec Burks at 4,500, who can actually get you some assists, get you some rebounds, not miss as many shots. Has similar upside. 4,500 on DraftKings for Alec Burks, 4,400 on FanDuel in a matchup against Atlanta. Yeah, give me that all day long. He's going to be someone that I have a ton of interest in. And then Jordan Clarkson, who has been really, really solid, coming in at 6,100 on DraftKings, 6K on FanDuel. Again, so I'm a very high usage guy off the bench. It's a fantastic matchup for him. So I have a lot of interest in him. But Alec Burks is my top guy from that backcourt. Larry Nance continues to, for some reason, be shunned by Larry Drew. My life goal is to find me someone that loves me as much as Larry Drew loves screwing over Larry Nance. But I digress. Still playing a decent amount of minutes. He does average like over a fantasy point per minute when you take Thompson and all these other guys off the floor. It's a great matchup here. Atlanta 22nd defensive efficiency, allowing 21.2 points, 15.1 rebounds to opposing centers. Larry Nance at 6,800, very, very good price. 7,100 on FanDuel, also a pretty strong price here. Would get a boost, obviously, if Tristan Thompson is out, so that's something we definitely need to monitor here. Cedi Osman has been a massive disappointment for the majority of the season, but at 4,300, Cedi Osman over on DraftKings, 4,600 on FanDuel. I do kind of like him here. Has been able to produce in these matchups against Atlanta twice already this season, averaging 28 fantasy points. Should play over 30 minutes. It's just a price type play. If he starts at the 4, I have more interest in him because Atlanta really, really struggling to defend power forwards. On the Atlanta side, Trae Young. Have to start with Trae Young here, who is 6,200 on DraftKings. He is really cheap over on FanDuel as well. He comes in at 6,600. Coming off a stretch of games where he has been playing better. The assist numbers have looked a little bit better. Shot still kind of struggling. He's shooting 46% from the floor, but 38.8% over on the season. But Cleveland, really, really bad against point guards. 30th in defensive efficiency to the position, giving up 26.2 points, 7.1 rebounds, 9.6 assists, 48.7% shooting, and 38% from 3. Without Prince, averages about a 28.5% usage rate to go along with his 1.04 fantasy points per minute. Has been good against the Cavaliers. I think one of the games where he went off, he had like, I have it right here actually, 35 points with 11 assists in that win. He 2 games, 45 fantasy points is what he is averaging. It's a pretty strong spot here for Trae Young. I do have some interest, especially in tournaments, but maybe even in cash, depending on how the rest of my lineup construction breaks down. I mentioned Kent Bazemore, who has been really, really solid. Strong option here, 25% usage rate, 1.06 fantasy points per minute whenever you take Prince off the floor. Cleveland allowing opponents to shoot 67.2% at the rim. Bazemore taking 36% of his shots at the rim. Kent Bazemore, 6,500 on DraftKings, 6,900 on FanDuel, continues to be a very, very good option. A really, really, really high upside play in the spot, averaging about 31 fantasy points against the Cavaliers already this season. It's just a really good spot here for him. I have a lot of interest in building around him if I could afford him. Also has some steals and blocks upside here. Cleveland is allowing opposing small forwards to shoot 46.6% from the floor, along with 37.4% from 3. Came close to hitting the Kevin Huerter play last night, 4,100 on DraftKings, 4,500 on FanDuel. Only got 25 minutes. That was a little disappointing. But this is a spot I do like going back to the well with some value. Kevin Huerter averaging 25 fantasy points in 20 minutes against Cleveland already this season. John Collins, not the best of matchups, but the dude is a double-double machine, averaging 1.28 fantasy points per minute whenever you take Taurean Prince off the floor. John Collins, 7,700 on DraftKings, 8,200 on FanDuel, just continues to drop like 40-plus fantasy points and pulling down double-digit rebounds. Really no reason to not love some John Collins outside of the fact that it's kind of hard to afford him. Dwayne Dedmon, continues to be really, really solid option, especially if Alex Lynn is out. Should get the bulk of minutes at the 5 and is in a great spot here tonight. Moving on, let's see, what's the next game in my notes? We have Boston at Memphis. Woo-hoo. Boston 3-point favorites, 199.5 over under. An under 200 total in the year 2018. What is this? Robert Williams is questionable. Aaron Baines is out. Joakim Noah, Dylan Brooks are probable. Chandler Parsons is out. Mike Conley finally off the injury report. That's nice to see. Kyrie Irving, second straight double-double, dropping another solid game last time out. Irving is 33 of 58 from the floor over his last 3 games, including 11 of 22 from three-point range. Really, really solid play from Kyrie Irving recently. Marcus Morris, 8 of 14 from 3 over the last 3 games, has been playing really well here as well. I don't have a lot of interest here. Kyrie Irving, obviously mentioned, he's been a monster recently. 50.7 fantasy points per game on 26 points, 26.4 points, 7.2 assists, 6.6 rebounds, 51.5% shooting. Just looking at his last 10 days, last 5 games again, just been shooting the ball really, really well. He's fine. 8,800 is pretty appealing here. 9,600 on FanDuel, not as appealing. It's just a shit matchup, and I just don't have a whole lot of interest in taking advantage of it when there's better places to go tonight. But if you're building a ton of lineups, obviously getting some Kyrie Irving, not a terrible idea. Jason Tatum, Marcus Morris can be used. Tatum second on the team in fast break points. Memphis has struggled to defend in fast breaks a decent amount this season. And Marcus Morris could see enough minutes to, or Marcus Smart could see enough minutes to pay off his cheap salary. But again, I just don't really see a reason to spend too much time on this game or attack too much of this game when there's better places to look. On the Memphis side, Mike Conley leads the team in drives per game at 12.8. I mentioned that because Boston has struggled against guards, especially guards that can create separation off screens and drive to the basket. That makes Mike Conley at 7,300 somewhat appealing over on DraftKings, especially in tournaments. And also the minutes he's playing is pretty appealing as well. Again, just a tournament option, but he's playing upwards 35 minutes a lot of nights. Doesn't have monster upside, but this could be a spot where you could get some low-owned exposure to Mike Conley. Over the last 10 games, drew a blank there. Over the last 10 games, Boston has really struggled against opposing centers. They rank 24th in defensive efficiency over that span. We've seen a decent amount of big men just feast on Boston. Marc Gasol, 7,600 on DraftKings, 8,900 on FanDuel, coming off a really strong outing. A stretch of games where he's been pretty solid. He did struggle against Sacramento a little bit, but 3 games over his last 4, over 40 fantasy points. Has some tournament upside in the spot. We've seen, like I said, we've seen some big men just feast on the boards against Boston recently, especially with Aaron Baines being out. Guys like Clint Capella pulled down 18 rebounds against Boston. It is a somewhat appealing spot here for Marc Gasol, again, in tournaments. Kyle Anderson can be used in cash, but it's Kyle Anderson, so yeah. Moving on, New York at Utah. Utah 13.5 point favorites in this game. Grayson Allen, Jay Crowder out. Rubio's questionable. Mitch Robinson is out. Tim Hardaway Jr. is questionable. And Dante Exum is probable. The Knicks continue to be a mess. Luke Kornet got thrown into the starting lineup. He's going to start again tonight. That's probably not going to go very well against Rudy Gobert. Yeah, that's not going to go very well at all against Rudy Gobert. And then, of course, we do have to deal with Tim Hardaway Jr. being questionable and the fact that they are pretty much fully healthy. And there's a lot of bodies that Fizdale can throw out there. That being said, I don't really have interest in too much of the New York Knicks side of this game. If Tim Hardaway Jr. is out, Emmanuel Mudiay does actually become a little more interesting here. Let me pull up his price tag. Emmanuel Mudiay, 5,700 on DraftKings, 5,800 on FanDuel, has, for the most part, been immune to David Fizdale being David Fizdale. Still does have a couple games where he does play less than 30 minutes, but he's been over 30 minutes most of the games, even with like Trier and Trey Burke being back. If Tim Hardaway Jr. sits, Emmanuel Mudiay, 26.3% usage rate, 1.10 fantasy points per minute. He's the kind of guy that could actually have some success here against Utah. Utah's allowing opponents to shoot 41.4% in the paint and 42.4% in the mid-range. 35% of his shots come in those two areas. I do kind of like him as a GPP option. You can go to the well with Kevin Knox coming in at 5,900 on DraftKings, 6K on FanDuel. 27% of his field goal attempts are above the break threes. Utah's allowing 37.3% on above the break threes this season. Kevin Knox, someone that I do kind of have a little bit of interest in. Coming off a down game against Milwaukee, but for the most part, getting you mid to upper 20s, low 30s with upside. It's not a terrible spot to get some exposure to Kevin Knox in tournaments. I don't know that I really want to go with the Luke Cornett here, but coming in at 4,200, he definitely could smash that salary, but he could also just get his crap pushed in by Rudy Gobert tonight, and that's a little bit concerning. He is 3,500 on FanDuel. I don't hate taking a shot and just punting with Luke Cornett on FanDuel. DraftKings, probably just tournaments here. And if you really, really, really want to take advantage of a little bit of narrative, we do have Enes Kanter returning to Utah, game after being benched. Super, super narrative revenge game option there. Yeah, that's pretty much it. You could use Tim Hardaway Jr. in tournaments if you want, but I just don't want to deal with him and his plantar fasciitis and all that stuff. Looking at the Utah side of things, I do have more interest in the Utah side, especially against a really bad Knicks defense. That starts with Derek Favors. Derek Favors going to see increase in minutes, should see an increase in minutes with Jay Crowder being out, but 4,900 on DraftKings, 5,800 on FanDuel. Very strong option here. Knicks 25th in defensive efficiency to power forwards on the season. They're giving up 21.7 points, 12.3 rebounds, 48.5% field goal shooting. And again, he should see 28 to 30 minutes tonight with no Jay Crowder. Very, very strong value option here. Rudy Gobert should just demolish Luke Cornett in the spot. Knicks giving up 46.6 rebounds and 52.5 points in the paint per game. Rudy Gobert continues to be a rebounding machine, coming off back-to-back really strong games. Did struggle a little bit against OKC and Portland, but again, another stretch of a couple strong games. Bad game against Orlando, some 30s in there, but at 8,200 on DraftKings and 9K on FanDuel, I have a lot of interest in Rudy Gobert. Unfortunately, there's other centers that I like a little bit more. Maybe Rudy Gobert gets up for this game and embarrassing Enes Kanter in the spot. So a little bit of narrative there as well. Opposing small forwards are shooting 38.9% on three-point attempts against the Knicks. Knicks allowing 37.1% three-point shooting overall. Mr. Ingles, Joe Ingles, 5,300 on DraftKings, 6,300 on FanDuel. A very strong value option here, especially on DraftKings. Did have a down game against Philly, but prior to that had been shooting the ball really well, getting you 30 plus fantasy points in 4 straight games. I have a lot of interest in Joe Ingles at his current price tag. You can look at Kyle Korver as a value play here, and then Donovan Mitchell. Someone continues to lead the team in usage, just shy of 29% on the season. Perfectly fine in all formats. 54% of his shots come at the rim or in the paint. New York does struggle to defend in those areas. He would be someone that I would definitely consider getting some more exposure to if Ricky Rubio misses this game. Something we definitely need to monitor the news on. Rubio can be used in GPPs if he plays. Dante Exum might be a very strong, especially on FanDuel, very strong value play here. Regardless of Rubio's status, Dante Exum has been playing really well recently. Did have a down game against OKC, but still playing a decent amount of minutes, getting you 20 plus fantasy points in 3 of the last 4 games. And then if Rubio sits, Exum would be another really, really strong value play in this spot. Moving on, Denver at Phoenix. Denver 5-point favorites in this one, 217.5 over under. We do know Paul Millsap, Gary Harris, Will Barton, guys close to returning, but not going to return. Should not return tonight. Malik Beasley, questionable for this game. Jamal Murray did tweak his ankle a little bit, not officially listed as questionable, but it is something that I do think we need to keep an eye on here, especially in a great matchup against Phoenix. Devin Booker has tallied at least 25 points in 7 straight games, averaging 29.9 points and 8.3 assists during that stretch. Devin Booker been playing really, really well recently. Nuggets in a really, really good spot here. That starts with Nikola Jokic, 30.7% usage rate, 1.56 fantasy points per minute when you take Barton, Millsap, and Harris off the floor. Jokic has struggled a little bit in 2 games against the Spurs. Did struggle a little bit against the Clippers, limited minutes, so I'll give him credit there. The Spurs had the defensive personnel to throw double teams at Jokic a lot and force the ball out of his hand. Phoenix does not have the personnel to do that. Nikola Jokic should just go absolutely bonkers here. Did it last time these teams faced off when he went 11-11 from the floor, with 11 rebounds, 11 assists, a lot of 11s, 10 of 11 from the free throw line. That's pretty impressive. Had a monster game. I love Nikola Jokic here as someone that I don't think is going to be very popular. I think a lot of people are going to, you're going to get Beal being forced into lineups, and then you're going to get like Harden or Davis being forced into lineups, and Nikola Jokic going to be, overlooked. So something to consider there. Jamal Murray, Monte Morris, both great spots to produce. Phoenix allowing opposing point guards to shoot 37.3% from three-point range. Murray takes 28% of his shots from that range. Jamal Murray, 6,900 on DraftKings, 7,400 on FanDuel. Very, very good GPP option. I like Monte Morris in cash just because he's really, really cheap. Still a really strong matchup. Still playing a decent amount of minutes. Only got 21 last game against San Antonio, but mid to upper 20s most spots this season. Just consistently getting there every single night, and it is a great spot. Torrey Craig, very good value play here. Phoenix allowing opponents to shoot 66% at the rim. He takes 43% of his shots at the rim. Torrey Craig would be so in, especially if Malik Beasley is out, but Torrey Craig continues to play a lot of minutes. Should get a decent amount of minutes here. Mike Malone does roll him out as kind of a defensive specialist, so he's going to be defending Devin Booker a lot. Torrey Craig coming in, 3,700 on DraftKings, 4,400 on FanDuel. I do have some interest in him tonight as a value. I do love Mason Plumlee in the spot. Continues to play mid to upper 20s, getting into the 30s at 5K against Phoenix. 6,200 on FanDuel, a little less appealing, but at 5K against Phoenix, I don't know how you don't love some Mason Plumlee in the spot on DraftKings. Trey Lyles can be used in tournaments as a value. And then Juancho Hernan-Gomez, someone else to consider. Still going to play a ton of minutes, would get a boost in shots, and things like that if Malik Beasley were to miss this game. If Beasley misses, Nick Young would get a boost in minutes, and you could use him on FanDuel as a punt. But yeah. Suns, not in the best of spots tonight. Devin Booker is still a really strong option here. Has just been phenomenal since returning from that hamstring injury. Probably don't need to read those numbers off again for the third time in the past 4 days. Does get a little bit of a tough matchup, but does lead the team in drives per game at 14. Phoenix a little bit lacking in rim protection whenever you don't have Millsap in there. Opposing shooting guards are shooting 44.9% from the floor and 40.5% from 3 over the last 10 games against Denver. It's pretty appealing for Devin Booker at 8,400 on DraftKings, who again has just been freaking outstanding, unstoppable, putting up monster games against just about everyone, even OKC putting up a really, really strong game against them. Really, really hard to overlook Devin Booker in this spot. I do love him. And again, someone that I don't think is going to have a lot of ownership. TJ Warren can be used in GPPs. Fell short of his 8th 20-point game in the previous 9 games last night by 1 point. Still playing a lot of minutes and getting a decent amount of shots. Denver does rank 26th in the defensive efficiency to power forwards. It's a decent spot here for him in tournaments, but not someone I really care to use in cash. Aiden Bridges can be sprinkled into GPPs. So can Rashawn Holmes as a value option here tonight. Holmes, 3,500 on DraftKings. Still only going to get you, 16, 17, 18 minutes, but does have potential to put up a strong game in that limited minutes. Moving on, Golden State, Portland. Replay of an overtime game we saw just a couple of nights ago. Golden State, 3.5 point favorites, 223.5 over under. Klay Thompson, 2 of 9 from 3-point range, shooting in that last game, shooting just 20.8% from three over the last 8 games. Zach Lowe put something in his article the other night or the other day about Klay Thompson and how he's forcing just a really bad shots recently. But looking at the Golden State side or the Portland side of things first, Damian Lillard, coming off a stretch of tough games, has not been playing to the standard that we expect out of Damian Lillard, but I still absolutely love him at his current price tag. 8,300 on DraftKings, 8,700 on FanDuel. Over the last 5 games, shooting 44.4% from three, almost 40% from three on the season. It's still a really good spot for him. I do have interest in him. Again, coming off, three games over his last 4 that have not been very good, but Damian Lillard, lots and lots of upside. Golden State still allowing opponents to shoot almost 68% at the rim. He does take a large portion of his shots at the rim, so 36% of his shots coming at the rim. Also, Golden State allowing opposing guards to draw 10.2 fouls per game. That is a boost to Damian Lillard if he can get to the line a few times extra, so I do really like him if you can afford him tonight. CJ McCollum, just GPPs. Again, he's always just a GPP option, but 6,300 on both sites is somewhat appealing here. Coming off a decent game against Golden State last time out. Aminu, decent number of minutes. Again, he's a guy, defensive specialist, but can get you some boards, can get you some scoring. Didn't shoot very well, 3 of 13 from the floor. Still had 12 rebounds against Golden State. Still put up a solid game. If you're looking for a cheap way to get exposure here, Al-Farouq Aminu at 4,500 on DraftKings, 5,200 on FanDuel. Not a terrible option in this spot. I think we have to talk about Jusuf Nurkic. 7,200 on DraftKings, 8K on FanDuel, has terrorized the Warriors so far this season. Last game, 35 minutes, 12 rebounds, 27 real points. I really like him in tournaments. The problem is Terry Stotts sometimes doesn't give him minutes. Obviously, we do have to be cognizant of that. They can go small at times. That is a little bit concerning, but Terry Stotts did talk up how good Jusuf Nurkic looked in that game. He's definitely high upside tournament option here tonight. Outside of that, I don't really have interest in anyone else from Portland. You could look at Myers Leonard or Zach Collins as like tournament punts or guys you can use on FanDuel. If the game goes small, they could get a couple extra minutes. Kevin Durant, I highlighted why I loved him last time out. Same reason applies here. Portland really bad against opposing small forwards, allowing them to shoot 44.4% from three, 47% from the floor. Kevin Durant only shot 28% from three against Portland last time out. Still had a really strong game. Obviously, some of that was overtime, but did triple-double in that outing. I do have a lot of interest in Kevin Durant at $9,700 on DraftKings. Still a very fair price for him over there. And over on FanDuel, 10-7, I am okay with that price. Stephen Curry, Klay Thompson, 2 guys that could enjoy some success beyond the arc because Portland is really struggling to defend the three-point line. Stephen Curry, 9,300 on DraftKings, 9,800 on FanDuel. Again, had a really solid game against Portland last time out. I have interest in him, especially in tournaments. Klay Thompson, not going to continue to shoot like absolute garbage. That's something to keep an eye on here. Draymond Green obviously did disappoint us against the Lakers. Did come out against Portland last time out, put up a really strong game. He's perfectly fine in cash and tournaments here. Blazers rank 30th in defensive efficiency to power forwards. I don't really want to use the Loonies and Jerebkos in this spot, but if you need the value on somewhere like FanDuel, feel free. Last game of the night, San Antonio Spurs at the Los Angeles Clippers. 3.5-point favorites for the Clippers, 227.5 over under. Lou Williams, monster game last night, has scored 24 or more points in 4 of his last 5 games. He's been really good of late for the Clippers. Looking at the LA side of this, actually the Spurs side first. Clippers do rank 25th in defensive efficiency to centers. LaMarcus Aldridge, 7,100 on DraftKings, 7,800 on FanDuel. Has not been playing great recently. Did have a really strong game against two good scoring games against Denver. This is a spot where he could absolutely crush. LA is allowing 24.4 4 points, 14.9 rebounds, and 52% shooting, two centers on the season. I call him a center because that's what he does. He does post up a lot as well, and LA allowing 1.03 points per possession on post ups. The issue that I have with LaMarcus Aldridge tonight, even though he is ridiculously cheap, on back-to-backs this season, averaging just 28.5 fantasy points per game compared to the 37 fantasy points per game he averages in the first half of a back-to-back. That's something that we definitely need to keep an eye on, but just GPPs for me here. Rudy Gay, decent matchup here, could snap out of his slump. Clippers allowing 21.7 points, 44.8% field goal percentage. Two small forwards and 21.9 points and 49.7% shooting to power forwards. I mentioned both of those because he does split time at both positions, primarily, though, playing the power forward spot. DeMar DeRozan leads the team in usage at 29.5%. 10.5 potential assists so far this season. DeMar DeRozan is a little bit interesting here, coming in at 8,500 on DraftKings and 8,800 on FanDuel. I have some interest in him in tournaments after he let everyone down against Denver last night. Bryn Forbes continues to play a bunch of minutes at point guard, has been playing really well, connecting on 56.6% of his shots over the last 5 games. Clippers do struggle against point guards. Both him and Derek White are interesting value options. Derek White, 3,700, does project actually to be a pretty strong play here. I have some interest in White, who is getting a decent amount of minutes and can kind of contribute in all spots. Kind of like him as a pivot off of Bryn Forbes. In this spot, I think Forbes might be a little bit more popular. Looking at the Clippers side of things, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander should be in a good spot here at 4,300 on DraftKings, but he just hasn't been playing very well, hasn't been getting a lot of minutes, and that kind of has me off of him outside of some tournament sprinkles. He does operate in transition 24% of the time. Spurs earlier in the season did really struggle against transition. That has tightened up a little bit, but he's still perfectly fine in tournaments. Tobias Harris absolutely let everybody down again last night. Coming off a couple down games, but I do absolutely like him in tournaments here as well. Spurs 28th in defensive efficiency to power forwards. Tobias taking a lot of shots at the rim or in the mid-paint and mid-range, two areas where San Antonio really struggles to defend. I really like him here as specifically as a tournament option here tonight. Same with Gallinari. Montrezl Harrell has struggled in this matchup this season. He did struggle last night, got in some foul trouble, kind of let everybody down. Can be sprinkled into GPPs, but not a guy that I have a ton of interest in tonight. Lou Williams, unstoppable of late, 37.6 fantasy points, 23.4 points, 6.6 assists, 69% three-point shooting, and 58% field goal percentage over his last few games. Lou Williams, 6,600 on DraftKings, a very, very strong cash and tournament option here tonight. Still playing a little bit of limited minutes, not going to see more than 30 most nights, but 30% usage rate off the bench. San Antonio does just struggle to defend opposing backcourts, and I really like him in cash and tournaments. And then you can sprinkle in Avery Bradley or Patrick Beverley if you so choose. I did promise that we would try to build a James Harden and Anthony Davis lineup, so let's take a look and see if we can do that here. Let's sprinkle in some Alec Burks. Let's get see if we can get Bradley Beal in here. Satoransky. Ooh, 3,900. That's going to be kind of difficult. Yeah, I don't know if it's going to be possible unless we get some news that if Markieff Morris is out, it does get a little bit easier to do. Let's see. By no means am I providing this lineup to anyone. Also, so don't play this lineup. Just throwing this out there to see if it can be done. And I guess it can actually be done. I guess it's not terribly hard. Let's throw Torrey Craig in there. And then there we go. You can do it. You can build a lineup with Beal, Harden, and Anthony Davis if you want to do so. Good luck in all your contests tonight, everybody. I will be back on Monday. I hope everyone enjoys their weekend.